episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, so as you can see, it's a Gordon MacPhail episode of the show. I think this is probably the first episode of the show I've done wholly on the G&M range, or some of them. And, well, how did this come to pass? Well, some time ago, I asked the company for some samples. So I asked the rep. And MacPhail's are not quite like sort of Hunter Lang, Douglas Lang and some of the other independent bottling companies that sort of do a range of bottlings 1 month and send a load of samples without being nagged for them, shall we say. MacPhail's are pretty big company and don't kind of have a direct line to the powers that be, shall we say, and phone them up and say, yeah, okay, send me some samples. So it's a bit of a rarity that I get samples from MacPhail's, and I thought, yeah, I'll do an episode of the show on them. And they kind of sat on the desk alongside all the other bottles that seem to be sort of congregating up here. And they carried on sitting on the desk. And then I thought, well, it's about time I actually did something with them. And lo and behold, by the time I decided to do that, they've gone and changed their bloody range around, haven't they? It's like, oh, for goodness sake. No doubt I can do a from the archives tasting of them at a later date. So basically they had this reshuffling of their range, and it's all a little bit confusing. So I said to the rep, said, look, all these new ranges and stuff, any chance of some samples? And lo and behold, indeed got some samples, and so I thought, right, let's get an episode of the show done while they're current and before they change everything all over again. So MacPhail's are certainly, I think, if not the oldest independent bottling company, they're certainly one of the oldest. Founded in 1895 in Elgin, and like a lot of these independent companies, they originally started off with a shop in the same location that still is today in Elgin, apparently, as I think it was a grocer's, general store, that kind of thing, and it was run by two guys by the name of James Gordon and John Alexander MacPhail, hence Gordon MacPhail. And so they sourced whiskies because they wanted to add whiskies to what they were selling, and like a number of shops did, and a number of shops would often sort of create their own blended whiskey and that kind of thing. And it seems to me that obviously they were really into their whiskies, and the focus seemed to sort of move towards that rather than selling groceries. Selling whiskey is far more interesting than apples and pears and what have you, isn't it, really, at the end of the day? And I believe that the company is currently owned, well, I know the company is currently owned by the Urquhart family, who have quite a long association with the company. I believe the earliest member of the Urquhart family, I forget the guy's name now, I think it was John, maybe, something like that, joined in and around sort of 1910, 1915, somewhere around that kind of time, and subsequent generations of the Urquhart family have taken on the reins of running the company. I must admit, I don't know exactly when they purchased the company from the founders, but they have indeed owned it for a number of years now, and obviously, as you well know, were one of the first independent companies, certainly in relative times, to purchase a distillery, and they purchased Ben Romack in 1993 and ploughed loads of money into that, and it's now a very successful distillery. And MacPhail's is a very successful company. I don't know what their annual turnover is, but when you have somewhere in the region of an inventory of 35,000 casks dotted around Scotland, it's going to be pretty damn big. Now, so, like I mentioned slightly earlier, they've had a kind of a rebranding, and it's not just a case of changing the labels. They've kind of slightly condensed their ranges, I believe, and obviously we'll get on to what we're tasting in a little while, but basically it was a bit confusing, I suppose. I mean, essentially you had, if memory serves me right, you had MacPhail's collection, which was generally sort of young stuff, under sort of 10 years old. You then had Connoisseurs Choice, which were either bottled somewhere between 40 and 46%. I think they went from 40 to 43, and anyway. Then you had the Cask Strength, the Private Collection, the Old and Rare, the Distillery labels, which I believe were sort of a legacy of when they were the official bottlers of some of those distilleries, which I've got a couple of today. And yeah, so it's, I mean, huge range of stuff. But the thing about the Connoisseur's Choice range, for example, which was one that I tended to sort of cherry pick, shall we say, there was some that I found that were the most consistent, and they would bottle, I would guess, several hundred bottles of a particular bottling, so several casks I would have thought, and they generally sort of lasted for quite some time. I mean, some of the more popular ones kind of moved on to the next vintage, shall we say, relatively quickly, but generally speaking it was, you know, there was a handful that I thought were particularly consistent. But now they've kind of changed all of that, not only, like I said, new labelling, new branding, all that kind of stuff, and the Connoisseur's Choice range now still exists, but the Cask Strength range has kind of been shuffled into it. So as you can see from the title picture, we're looking at some of the Cask Strength bottlings, and I thought it was nice just to chuck in an older bottling, so you could see the change in the livery, shall we say. And I don't know if you're like me, I think the changes damn sight better. I mean, I was never a fan of the old brown Cask Strength labellings. They were all a bit brown, beige, and I guess they needed to be changed, to be honest with you. So basically you've got the Connoisseur's Choice, which includes the sort of Cask Strength and non-Cask Strength, Discovery range, which I think has just essentially replaced the MacPhail's collection. You've now still got the Distillery collection, or Distillery labels as the case may be. The Private Collection is going to be revamped later on in this year, maybe next year possibly, I don't know. And then they've got this range that they introduced in 2010 called Generations, where they bottle uber old and rare stuff, which is well out of my price range. And so the Connoisseur's Choice is now, I'm guessing they're bottling them in batches now, so they're obviously reducing the number of casks they're bottling at a time. I don't quite think they're at single cask level yet, but certainly from seeing the emails coming in from the rep saying, right, okay, batch one is almost sold out, I've only got a handful of bottles of this and this, I just thought, there's no point in sort of asking for samples, because you get the samples and they're all gone, you know, and it's a bit of a shame, because I liked the continuity to a certain extent of the Connoisseur's Choice range. But you know, it's a move. It's maybe modernising things slightly, I suppose, and you know, MacPhail's have certainly had their labelling changes over the years, but I think this has probably been their biggest shake-up of their range, not only with regards to the labelling, the bottle shape, design, all that kind of stuff. So so it's going to be interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, the liquid's the liquid, isn't it? It doesn't really, to me, it doesn't really matter what kind of bottle it's in. I know a lot of people are very into the branding and all that kind of stuff, certainly the marketing bods anyway, should we say, but for me, you could bottle it in, you know, just a plain ugly looking bottle as long as the juice inside is damn good, I really don't care. But anyway, I have to say that the current labelling and livery is, I think, really quite nice, and certainly looks quite impressive. Loads of information, the sort of information that sort of most people want to know these days, you know, sort of cask types, distillation, bottling dates, yada yada yada, you know, the usual stuff. So anyway, long overdue episode of the show. I think that's enough waffle. If you want to find out more information about the history and what have you on MacPhail's, their website is pretty damn good and pretty intensive with regards to certainly the information about their history, which they're obviously very proud of. So time to shut up and have a look at what we'll be tasting today.
If I could go back to these memories I have of you.
Right, Right, okay, so going to kick off today's tasting with the two bottlings in the Distillery Labels collection. The first one is a Longmorn, distilled in 2003, bottled this year, making it 15 years old, bottled at 43%. I haven't come across Longmorn for quite some time. It used to be quite a sort of like a regular bottling in the Independents, but then seems to have sort of disappeared almost to a certain extent, and so I don't really come across it that often anymore. The second bottling we'll be looking at is a Scapa. This is a 13-year-old Scapa, distilled in 2005, bottled this year at 43%. Then we're going to move on to the cask strength bottlings. This is the old bottling. This was bottled in 2017 under the Gordon MacPhail cask strength collection. You still with me? It was distilled in 2004, bottled at 59.6%. Oh, it's a Tormore. I should have told you what it is, shouldn't I? It's Tormore, aged in a first fill bourbon cask. And again, Tormore, one of those ones you don't see that often, so could be interesting. Second bottling we'll be looking at is one of my favourite distilleries. Oh, yes, it's a Macduff. This is in the new Connoisseurs Choice Cask Strength range. I hope you're keeping up with this. It is an 18-year-old Macduff, distilled in 2000, bottled this year at 57.2 from a refill bourbon hoggy. The next bottling we'll be looking at is again in the Connoisseurs Choice Cask Strength series. This is a Pulteney, distilled in 1998, bottled this year, aged 19 years at 57.5% from a first fill American Standard barrel. And finally, the last one we'll be looking at is a lovely old, just giving that away, is an old Glen, Scotia. This was distilled in 1992, again bottled this year at 26 years of age, bottled at 55.5 from a first fill American Standard barrel. So I think we've got quite a nice selection of different styles. So let's kick off with a bit of Longmorn then, shall we? Right, okay, so let's see what the nose gives us on this end. Quite fresh, minerally, slightly grassy. It's got some nice lemony citric notes, a bit of barley. Quite youthful. I mean, yeah, it is only 13. No, it's actually 15. It doesn't seem 15. It has to be said. It's got a real youthfulness to it, which I think is quite nice. Yeah, really quite appealing. There's a little bit of rich fruit underneath, which, although I'm not sure of the cask type, I would guess, looking at the colour, American oak. There is a slight sort of refilly sherry kind of note there in the background. Yeah, that sort of nice richness, almost slightly dried fruit kind of character. Yeah, I like that. It's nice. I don't get a great deal of creaminess or anything like that. It's, like I say, there's not a huge amount of oak character, which is allowing the sort of citric, grassy, crisp sort of spirit character to come through, which I think is really quite appealing. Let's see what the palate's like. More weighty on the palate, a little bit more oak character. Certainly it's giving it a touch of white chocolate. There's more honey, a little bit of spice. I'm sure this is a refill sherry cask because I'm getting dried fruit and sort of almost sherry spice on the finish. If it is, it's really nicely balanced. Like I said, a bit more oak on the palate, more honey, weightier, denser. Still a little bit of grass, but not quite so much, not quite so fresh and citric as the nose would lead you to believe. But it's got a nice weight to it. Nice weight, good length, nice progression. Yeah, it's a pleasant, a pleasant whiskey. So yeah, nice start. Right, okay, so moving on to the Scapa now. Sort of many years ago, when I first sort of got into the whisky industry, one of the earliest bottlings that I tasted, I think, was a mid-80s Scapa that was bottled by MacPhail's, which is wonderful. Salty, coastal, intense whiskey, and obviously, as we know now, Scapa isn't like that at all. It's completely different, and so this is going to be modern Scapa, so probably lots of oak and all that kind of stuff. So let's see what the nose gives us. Yep, lots of oak, quite young, getting that rose petal kind of Auchentoshan-y kind of character. Sweet strawberry mousse, lots of oak, lots of creamy, buttery American oak. I mean, this has got to be first fill. Now, I mean, one of the interesting things about MacPhail's is that they very rare. Well, I'm pretty much certain that nowadays they don't buy mature stock. They buy new fillings. So this will have been from the distillery when it was distilled, and some of the time I believe they just buy the casks. Sometimes they send the casks and have them filled, but this kind of like this is just kind of just reminds me essentially of the current sort of distillery release, with all that huge oak and rich buttery creamy. I mean, it's okay. I mean, I'm not. The spirit itself is pleasant. It's a little bit too oaky for me, or a little bit too oak dominated. And the spirit has got a bit of that youthful kind of rose petally kind of character, and there's no salt, no coastalness, no nothing, you know, in that respect. But it is what it is. It's modern Scapa, you know. And long gone are the days of that sort of lovely kind of almost sort of Talisker-esque kind of coastally sort of character. But anyway, let's see what the palate gives. There's a little bit more complexity on the palate. Again, lots of oak, lots of that strawberry moussey, rose petal, Toshan-y sort of character. A little bit of citrus has crept in now, and I'm getting a touch of barley. The oak is maybe not quite so overly encompassing. It does hit you right straight on, but it kind of like tails off, so it does allow a little bit more character to come through. But again, there's no real salt, there's no real windswept kind of coastal notes. It's very pleasant, it's big, it's chunky, it's a little bit simplistic. But again, like I said, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. You could certainly enjoy drinking a dram of that, and it's always the case where a distillery's character changes and quite drastically, and you remember it being one thing, and then you sort of come back to it a few years later and it's completely changed, and you're going, what? So yeah, on the one hand you have to kind of like ignore that to a certain extent, put that to one side and say, right, evaluate it as a whiskey in its own right, and if you do that, it's not bad, it's pleasant, not particularly complex, but pleasant, straightforward. But when you think about it within the context of what has come before it, you think, well, but anyway, you make your mind up, you know. Grab hold of a bottle. It's certainly, you know, you certainly won't be disappointed. But yeah, let's move on. Okay, so let's move on to the first of the cask strength bottlings. This is the Tormore. This is the 12-year-old Tormore. Let's see what the nose gives us. Fresh, quite grassy. As Tormore often can be. A little bit of barley character. There's a sort of an odd kind of earthy, sort of burnt herbs, maybe burnt heathery kind of note there. Sort of a little bit of oily, sort of plasticky, rubbery sort of notes. I'm guessing there's a little bit of faints or what have you has crept in on here. It's getting quite manure-y now, which is not what you really want from Tormore. You know, Tormore should be sort of like vivacious and grassy and citric, and this is a little bit on the kind of stinky side, which I don't mind. I like a bit of manure with my whiskey first thing in the morning. Not that I'm doing this first thing in the morning, I hasten to add. But it's kind of, it's a bit funky. I mean, maybe with a bit more time in the cask, that funk might have been removed. And I'm not getting an awful lot of cask either, so supposedly first fill American oak, it certainly hasn't kind of delivered up the sort of the vanillins and what have you that you would expect. It's possible that maybe putting a drop of water with that might bring out the oak, but yeah, okay, let's give it a try. Oh, that burnt heathery sort of oddness is a bit prevalent on the finish. There's some barley, some honey. The alcohol is obviously masking, so I'm going to put a little drop of water with it. But it's very natural, should we say. And like I said, it's not what I would expect from a Tormore. God dear me, God, that's brought out the bloody manure. My God, that is really stinky now. I'm getting a little bit more oak in actual fact, so it's kind of oak and manure kind of thing, you know, which is just like, what? And you can sort of smell the slight sort of rose petally kind of youthfulness of the spirit as well. Little soapiness crept in too, which I think again I would have been inclined to kind of leave it in the cask for a bit longer, but let's just see what the palate's like now. Burnt chamomile. Oh dear God, that's weird. Manure, burnt chamomile, rose petals. Phew, that is the most peculiar Tormore I think I've ever tasted, it has to be said. It's entertaining, I'll give you that. But damn, that's a funky whiskey. Right, okay, time to torture my taste buds with the Macduff then. Well, maybe, I don't know. Let's after that one, after the Tormore, wow, well, let's see where we go with this one. By Macduff standards, it's actually pretty clean. There's a sort of slightly metallic-y sort of note in there, a little sort of high-toned sort of metallic note, but a lot of honey, lot of barley, lot of oak, lot of American oak. Yep, what was it? First fill? No, refill. That was a lot of oak for a refill hoggy. You know what? I think for a Macduff, this nose is not too bad at all. I'm not getting the usual stinky manure burnt rubber kind of character. It's actually pretty clean as far as Macduffs go. And it's got a nice depth to it. It's not hugely complex, but it feels like it has a nice maturity. Touch of green gauge, gooseberry kind of coming through now. Lime. Right, let's see what the palate gives us. Pretty clean actually. Yeah, just nice coffee, honey. It's the alcohol is obviously masking the finish, and it's quite mouth-watering. But it's got pleasant juiciness, and again, there's no real serious funk. It has a little edge, a little bit of industrial notes, but then you're never going to fully get away from the character of Macduff. Water doesn't really do a great deal for the nose, it has to be said. It's all a bit, but just bringing out the American oak a little bit. But it's lost the honey. Does seem to smell a little bit older. It seems to have sort of kind of reduced the sort of like the rich honeyed kind of notes, and I'm now getting a little bit more, slightly more mature spirit kind of notes. Again, pleasant, clean. That is, I think, is the key word here, shall we say. Let's see what the palate's like now. Quite pleasant. Longer, fuller, pretty simple stuff. Some nice barley, bit of fruit, touch of apricot, a little bit of spice. Again, not a huge amount of oak. It's more supportive, shall we say. You get the sort of like the impression of the tannins rather than actually tasting them. So yeah, you know what? I think for as Macduffs go, I have tasted a damn sight worse than that. Yeah, that's a bloody good cask. Okay, so let's move on to the Pulteney. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Green fruit, sort of goose, not quite gooseberry, but in that sort of green fruit kind of area. Sort of maybe underripe sort of apple, a bit of pear maybe, salt, some lovely American oak, some lovely sort of soft vanillins. Certainly smells like it's got a bit of a kind of bit of maturity to it. There's a touch of a little bit of peat, a little bit of manure possibly. Yeah, that's got to be the theme for today's tasting, hasn't it? I'll have a little bit of manure with my whiskey. Thank you very much. It's got a nice kind of ozony, sort of briny, sort of freshness to it, which is kind of like what you want from Pulteney. And this is a 19-year-old Pulteney, and it's fresh as a daisy. But it has that sort of just in the background, that little bit of maturity, and you're thinking, okay, so you're getting a bit of mature oak, a little bit of mature fruit as well. Yeah, this has got a lovely complexity. I really like this nose. Yeah. Oh, getting a bit of white licorice now. White licorice. Not much in the way of spice, but let's see what the palate's like. Don't really think it needs any water. I mean, it's a little drying on the finish, but it's got a lovely weight. Again, lovely coastal finish, touch more oak on the palate, quite fleshy, dense apricot, apple, touch of cinnamon on the finish. That is really, really nice. I like that. There's an edge to it, but it's kind of sort of almost a sort of a salty, sort of edgy, sort of kind of note, obviously being amplified by the alcohol. But I quite like that. I think that's quite impressive. Nose is a bit, I wouldn't say kind of flat, but now put a drop of water with it. It's less effusive, shall we say. A little bit more oak, a little bit, which is flattening it a little bit. Still got some lovely richness to it. is it almost kind of grapefruit note come out now. Yeah, okay, it's not bad at all. I think I personally prefer it neat, certainly on the nose, but let's see what the palate's like. I don't think it's done any favours at all, to be bluntly honest with you. It's got this kind of weird sherbety lemonade-y sort of thing going on now. Really shortened. It's a bit more vague, a bit watery. Yeah, I'm not keen on that once I've now put a little drop of water with it. Certainly at cask strength I thought it was actually really nice, and certainly just putting water with it has done it absolutely no favours at all. And it's a classic example of what water can do to a cask strength whisky. Sometimes it can bring things out, it can lift it, it can sort of certainly mitigate some of the alcohol, and you get the other characteristics on. Other occasions it kind of almost causes the whole thing to fall apart, and shall we say emphasises its kind of wrinkles and its less than pleasant nuances. And I think in this particular case it really hasn't done it any favours whatsoever. So neat, yep, fine, pleasant whisky, water, yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the final whisky of this afternoon. This is the 26-year-old Glen Scotia, and don't know what the price of it is, but I can imagine it ain't going to be cheap, so let's hope it's bloody good then, shall we? Oh, that's lovely. Classic sort of Campbelltown notes of sort of fish and coffee, earth, treacle, tar. It's almost got a sherry kind of character, but but it is definitely a first fill American cask. But it just goes to show you what a pungent character Glen Scotia actually has, with that sort of real big, malty, treacly kind of dark fruit character. Oh, gorgeous maturity. I mean, doesn't have that sort of sawdusty oak character. The oak is actually again quite sort of reserved, and it's all about the sort of oxidised sort of dried fruit spirit kind of oxidation. Oh, that's stunning. Lovely herbal notes. More malt, bit more fish. Oh, that's the sort of nose you just want to keep smelling and smelling. I mean, that is absolutely stunning. So what the power's like. Fresh, quite coastal, so I imagine this is one of the casks, although I know that MacPhail's have warehousing in Elgin. They do have casks stored with distilleries and elsewhere, and I'm guessing this has probably spent its time at Glen Scotia because it's got that lovely Campbelltown salt, mouth-watering, dry, dark, pruny walnut. I mean, you could be mistaken for thinking that's a sherry cask, but it's got a lightness to it, and it's got that lovely mature fruit kind of character. It's certainly, on first taste you think, oh, sherry, and then you think, well, no, there's no herbalness, there's no kind of that classic cherry dried fruit. It's all about the spirit, and the oak again is all kind of like fairly laid back and supportive rather than adding any particular sort of amount of vanillins or sawdust or oak. It's all about the spirit, and my God, that's good. That is really long, absolutely stunning, really good. What a way to end the tasting, that's all I'm saying. Believe me, I know Okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show. Firstly, a big thank you to Gordon MacPhail for the samples for today's episode of the show. Obviously, again, like I say, often enough, without the support of you guys watching and the independent companies and distilleries that send samples, there wouldn't be an episode of the show. So the Longmorn, yep. No, can't argue with that. I mean, all right, maybe not the most complex of Longmorns I've ever come across, but you know, pleasant. Got some nice character, and you wouldn't be disappointed by that. The Scapa, well, like I said, it's modern Scapa. You know, don't get sort of too hung up upon how Scapa used to be. If you like whiskies with a forest of oak, then that's your baby. The Tormore, well, it was entertaining, shall we say. I mean, I certainly had quite a fair amount to say about it. Whether you really want to drink that or not, of course, is an absolute another matter. But it was interesting nevertheless. Surprise of the day, I think, has to be the Macduff. Again, I love it when I get samples from these types of distilleries that I have a less than stellar opinion of, and suddenly it goes, wow, you know, my God, you know, this distillery can actually make some nice spirit. And then you sort of bemoan the fact that the majority of the bloody Macduffs you come across are bloody awful. But it makes it all worthwhile, it has to be said, when you come across one that actually bucks the trend. And as they say, every dog must have its day, shall we say. Anyway, the Pulteney, yeah, well, without water, that is a perfectly pleasant Pulteney. With water, it is god awful. I think that's probably can't really say much more than that, to be bluntly honest with you. And obviously, whiskey of the day had to be the old Glen Scotia, 26-year-old Glen Scotia. Absolutely stunning, just classic old Campbelltown, and you know, absolutely gorgeous. So what does that say about MacPhail's? Well, it just basically says they're exactly the same as every other independent bottling company. Some of the stuff they bottle is absolutely sublime. Some of the stuff they bottle is less than sublime, but that's the way it goes. And the thing is, sort of, you know, as I've probably said on more than one occasion, I'm not going to buy it blind. I'm not going to buy it without tasting it first, because, you know, I need to know what the quality is like, because these bottlings are so variable. And if that means that I don't do business with certain independent bottling companies or what have you, then, well, so be it. There's plenty of fish in the sea. But anyway, that's by the by. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the show. I think it's been a bit of fun, as all of them have a tendency to be. Next week, what am I doing next week? Oh yeah, I'm going to do a sort of a general roundup of new and new-ish stuff. So again, it will be a bit of a sort of like a Hobson's choice, I suppose, I guess. But anyway, and then the episode after that is going to be really interesting. But I'm not letting on any more than that. So, and like I said, this is the reason why it's taken me so long to get MacPhail's episode, because I've just got them backed up. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the show. All that's left to say is good afternoon and good gramming.